Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for once again joining us here on our Chamber Update. We try and bring you some interesting guests, some interesting topics to talk about the different stuff that's happening in this crazy world right now. Today, my guest is a second-time guest on my show, is John Bates, the job guy, with everybody looking to get back into the workforce, hopefully, with unemployment benefits stopping. John has done a phenomenal job for numerous people that I've sent over, plus hundreds of others, on how to get back into the job market. Some of the tips and tricks that you're going to need to update your resume, and we'll talk about a couple of other subjects. So again, welcome the job guy, John Bates.
Hey, Jack. Good to see you again.
Good to see you. Sorry we can't do this in person like we just talked about a little bit. Someday. But, as I just mentioned, unemployment benefits are stopping, and it's time for people to get back to work. The kids are back in school, everybody's settled. So, right now, a lot of people are thinking about changing careers. They weren't happy with the job they had before, looking to do something different. How would you advise them to divine their new path?
Well, it's interesting that that's probably the primary part of my business is people trying to figure out how they could remarket themselves without going back and getting a PhD. And what I like to point out to people is that there are two aspects to a job that both have to work. And unfortunately, most people only think about the first one, which is what would the work be that I would be doing? And I mean, that's certainly important. But interestingly, although most people hire me thinking that, when we dig down into the tea leaves a little bit, what we find out is that it isn't always the job itself that causes the dissatisfaction. Many times it's the conditions under which people work, whether it's industry conditions or economic conditions, whether it's salary, work-life balance, work schedule, growth, or company culture, which includes a bad boss. So the first thing you want to do when you're thinking about changing careers is to start by thinking about what you need to get back in terms of all of those things, not just now, but going forward. So that way, when you do look at jobs, you'll be able to make sure that the job lines up with the other parts of your life and it's going to really suit your needs. In terms of what the job is itself, I always like to point out to people that those not looking to go out and get additional credentials particularly, that they think about the fact that it's more than just picking a job. For us to get a new job, we have to be in an interview and convince someone to hire us,
Yep.
which means we have to have something to offer, what do we have to offer? Which is skills. And so the secret sauce that I use is helping people to dig into what they've done, to identify the patterns of skills and experiences that they both enjoy using, that the good go out and look at the job market, not based on title, but based on the activities that you're performing. Trying to pick jobs by job title nowadays is so frustrating, Jack, because I'm sure you've seen it.
Yeah.
Companies all have the different names for the same jobs, or they'll be you'll have the different job with the same name. But so the key is really to look at what the responsibilities are, and then you can down select based on how cool the job is, based on how feasible the job is, and based on how abundant the job is.
Well, John, in your opinion and through your experience, a lot of us over the last 21 months, however long this has been doing a lot of these virtual meetings, similar to what you and I are doing now. What percentage of those jobs do you think are going to stay virtual? And instead of going back in, to the office, back into the brick and mortar, what do you think?
Golly, if I could answer that question literally, I'd be a wealthy man, I think. I don't think anybody really knows the answer to that, but I think the safe bet is that it's going to be somewhere where it was before and where it has been because of COVID. I think that the one thing that COVID has done is it's proven to companies that they can trust people a lot more than they used to think they could to be able to do the work. I think it's also without being on site. And I think it's also proven that there's a benefit to employers from when a worker can, if their child is out sick or they need to run an errand, they don't have to take a whole day off. They can just do that and make up shorten their lunch or do something at the end of the day. So from the company standpoint, there's definitely more willingness to hire remote people. Conversely, I think it's also opened up in the employee's mind the option of working remotely. I will tell you that while companies, I think everyone knows, had a bias to wanting people to be on site, employees did too. I mean, the vast majority of the clients that I work with pre-COVID couldn't imagine virtual work. None of them wanted, well, very few wanted full remote. They wanted part remote so they could be home doing something on a certain day. But now employees are also more open-minded to remote work.
Yeah, because there's a lot to be said about interactions, with your coworkers, other people in your office building that you might, share a building with, friendships that you've made, in the coffee spot, something like that. And the human interaction has been very, very important. As we all know, especially in the chamber world, we haven't been able to do a lot of face-to-face either.
Right.
And a lot of us miss it. We miss it. But if I was somebody who was interested in working home, how can I find a work from home job, or can I negotiate with my current employer to switch to work from home?
Well, the answer is yeah, a lot more than we think, right? In terms of literally looking for jobs, if we're talking about the published job market, the keys are to understand what search terms to use. I mean, right now, if you look at all the search engines out there for jobs, Indeed.com is far and away the #1 job site in terms of the number of jobs and the number of job searchers that are successful online. So Indeed actually allows you to look for jobs that are remote. But I find that a very effective keyword is WFH, work from home jobs, by having human intervention, by having someone help them to get their credentials to someone who needs them more often than not before the job is ever posted. And what's cool about this is that the very first part of a hiring cycle is that a company says, look, I need a person that can solve my problem or help me seize my opportunity that I can work with. At that point in time, if that person that has a need meets the person who can solve the problem, they typically haven't even developed any kind of prejudice or bias that what that person would look like, where they would physically be, what their backgrounds would be. They would be strictly focused on, can this person solve my problem? Do I want to work with this person? So that's the best time to navigate really any kind of negotiation, is to try to get there earlier in the cycle. Now, if you get into the interview, another way to approach it is to make sure that you're focusing in the interview on outcomes, but to be able to carve out as much value as possible, to be able to get the hiring managers to share as much pain points as possible, because the more you galvanize yourself in their mind as the person that can take them to the promised land, the more open-minded they become on what those terms of engagement might look like, whether it's work from home or salary or reduced work hours or whatever it is.
Well, I know talking to some folks that are, looking to change jobs, looking to change fields, it's important to them. And company culture, how do I know if my next employer's got a good one or a bad one?
Well, there are a couple of websites that you can use which can help. Glassdoor is a good website to join. I mean, people have been using that for years. And Glassdoor is kind of cool in the fact that employees give company reviews on the company culture. A lot of times they'll share their salary. So if you're curious about what a position might pay, it's a good resource to go there. A lot of times they actually even share what happened in the interview. So imagine how cool that would be to have an interview and be able to look it up and see what the questions were that you're going to be asked. That's pretty good. Indeed also does this, and Indeed is becoming a big player in this, so that when you go and you do an Indeed search, if you click on the name of the company, not the job, you click on the name, it will take you to the review page for that company. And they have like cool graphs and things like that. So those are good ways to do it. But my top recommendation is to try to find people that work there. So being involved in LinkedIn is a great tool to be able to track someone down and be able to ask them what it's like to work there. Or if you have any misgivings, once you're in the interview process, before you accept the offer, it's perfectly acceptable to ask if you can talk to a few people that work there to get a sense of the lay of the land.
Well, I've been looking around and I'm not getting a lot of good responses on my applications. What can I do to generate some more activity, to get some more responses?
Usually it's a content problem. What's happening with companies nowadays in the published job market is that HR will put together a job posting, put it in a computer, and then they walk away. And the computer will then, post that job posting wherever, on Indeed, LinkedIn, their own website. And as resumes come in, the computer compares the content of the resume to what it's programmed to look for, which is usually the content of the job posting itself. And so whoever does the best job of claiming language will appear on the top of the list of people for HR to look at. So you figure if a company posts a job now, and let's just say conservatively speaking, they get 50 applicants. Well, HR is not going to look through 50. They're going to look through 10 or 12, whatever the number is that they want. And the 10 or 12 that they look at are most usually going to be driven by who does the best job of claiming the keywords. Now, the other part of this, Jack, is that we need to understand that all these systems are not created equal in terms of sophistication. So some of them can struggle with things that people think are really cool formatting ideas, like headers and footers and tables and columns and section breaks and graphics and color. All that stuff can interfere with the computer even finding the text to be able to compare to what it's programmed to look for. And as a big surprise, PDF format, not recommended. That's a shock to most people, right? I can see the look on your face. It's a shock to you.
Why?
PDFs are good if you're going to exchange something as a document, okay? Because the purpose of a PDF is it can retain its formatting, and it's agnostic to the platform. It could be Apple, it could be Google, it could be Microsoft, it doesn't matter. PDF's going to look the same to everybody. The problem is that if the computer technology the company's using is built to pull content out of the document, the PDF format makes it hard to find. And you would be surprised at how contorted PDF information can be when it's cut and pasted into some sort of a database that's then searched for keywords.
Well, what would you suggest people use instead of the PDF?
Well, Word is the most common. It's pretty much universal. So using Word is going to be the safest. More of the sophisticated sites now will actually tell you, we accept resumes in these different formats. But the ones that concern me are the ones that don't state that, and they don't even understand themselves what's happening, because a lot of these companies, particularly the ones using the more legacy applicant tracking systems like Brass Ring or Taleo or some of these, a lot of these systems have been in place for 15 or 20 years. And originally what it was is that the companies took, which was a manual process or faxes or whatever, put it online, and they haven't necessarily gone back and re-engineered how they look at these things to begin with, and maybe never even occurred to them that they need to be accounting for these different formats, whether it's Google Docs or Pages documents or whatever.
Yeah, because we're all getting used to these virtual, Teams and Microsoft this and Zoom and StreamYard like we're on. So it's difficult to know which ones. Now, we've all talked and heard about the hidden job market. What is the hidden job market? How do I access it?
Well, the hidden job market really is the fact that most companies hire people to solve a problem, right? And so the hidden job market, in order for us to get a job, there are two conditions that have to exist. Okay, one is a company has to need something that we can do, and the other is that they have to know we exist. Right? So the hidden job market means that what we're doing is, rather than targeting the posted position, we're targeting those two things. We're learning to think about ourselves not in terms of a position title as much as we are as a solution to a set of problems. And so the better job we can do of being able to define who we can help and how they would measure success, the better we are able to look and see, okay, let me target the thing that's going to create a job in October, rather than waiting for October for the competition to be created and for them to be looking at trying to narrow down the herd. And that's where things like ageism comes into play, or skill gaps comes into play, or the lack of a bachelor's degree, or the need to work from home. All of those things become filters once competition's created. But if we get before the competition's created, none of those filters filters are all that important. The other part of the hidden job market is understanding that somehow we have to have access to whomever is going to end up hiring us. So developing a network is critically important, both in the obvious sense, where let's connect to a network of people that work in the companies we want to work in, okay? But the more creative approach to networking is let's connect to the people who network with those people. Let's connect to the trusted advisors, the consultants, the vendors, the funders who know what's going on in their client companies and are motivated to be able to help their client companies succeed by introducing them to an awesome person. It's a very empowering thing. It's really, frankly, how I built my business.
Well, in sales, we all know a warm introduction is better than a cold call any day.
Yeah.
So if you can get somebody, in their sphere of influence to introduce you, maybe, speak up a little bit for you, it gives you a whole step up ahead.
Absolutely.
Another question I have, and people ask this as well. What do you think about in the job postings, listing salaries? Is that becoming more and more common, or is that still kind of a secret, so to speak?
Well, that's a fascinating. Your timing on that question is really excellent, because for years and years and years, companies have held all the cards salary-wise. And as I had mentioned earlier, I mean, there is a little bits and pieces of intel that come out, whether it's Glassdoor that I mentioned before. You can look on Indeed and do salary searches, although Indeed doesn't really usually know the salaries. But the state of Colorado has introduced something very recently, this year as a matter of fact, where they're requiring companies to post salaries. And it's going to be curious. I don't know how it's going to play out. It's sort of a mixed bag. I mean, the good news for people that live in Colorado and work in Colorado is, hey, guess what? Now I know what the position pays. It's supposed to level the playing field. The problem is with remote work. Right. So what you see is job postings that will say, we're looking for people except from Colorado. So they,
wow.
Seriously, because the companies don't want to put the ranges out there, because from their point of view, I mean, let's say I have a job, let's say I'm in New York. Do I want to pay someone in New York the same price as I want to pay someone from Iowa, right? Where the cost of living is like a third. Why would I pay them New York salaries, right? So would the salary offer be the same from the company's standpoint? No. But from the employee standpoint is, hey, wait a minute. Why should I be? How do I know what your filters are? I mean, sure. So the idea of it is to level the playing field, mostly from a gender equality standpoint. But we'll see. I don't know. I can kind of think that falls into the same category as that other question you asked me about remote work, that if I knew the answer,
Yes, you'd be a very, very rich man.
Yes, I would be, yes.
Right now, a lot of us are so used to having these remote meetings, working from home, whatever it might be. And it just seems to me, personal opinion, the dress code has gone right down the chute. How can somebody prepare for an interview, especially if it's a video interview?
Well, yeah, it's interesting. First thing you want to do when you're preparing for an interview is make sure you do your research, right? And figure out like you're talking about dress code. I mean, it's certainly part of it, right? Is this a suit and tie place? Is it a cutoff jeans place? Well, I guess cutoff jeans are no longer. But is it short? I showed my age. Is it shorts and sandals kind of place, or somewhere in between? I mean, that can help you, because the image that you're creating appearance-wise is very important in a video interview. It's difficult to maintain eye contact and energy and be conscious of the background that you have, and make sure that you're not going to have a cat running across behind you, or someone cutting down a tree, or little kids running in underneath your feet, or things like that. But the most important thing with interviewing is understanding that to prepare for an interview, it's incumbent upon us to anticipate how we can help, and to go into each interview with an enthusiastic presentation of how we understand the opportunity and the problems that an open job represents, and how we can successfully achieve those outcomes. And we need to understand that that's a person-specific thing as well. So what I find is most companies nowadays they may have 4 or 5 people interview a candidate. And the reason is that each of them are looking at different aspects. I mean, a peer is not going to care about what the vice president cares about, which is not going to care about the same thing as human resources is going to care about. So taking a minute to think about how you would influence and impact the individuals that you're encountering in the interview, and then make sure you're maintaining a collegial presentation on your Zoom meeting or whatever it is, are the keys to success.
Yeah, it's very difficult because, as you and I talked a little bit before, it's hard to get the feel for somebody, unless you are sitting across from them or in the same room. Facial expressions, body language, the way you handle yourself, those are very important. Now, John, tell us, how do you help somebody who's looking for a job? Your
Well,
service.
you want me to describe my services?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay. So there's 2 types of people who come to me. There are people who come to me because they know they're not in the right career situation and they're not sure where to turn. The other type of people that come to me are people that are pretty clear on where they want to go, but have just not been successful getting there, whether the resume is underperforming, maybe they're not doing too well in interviews, maybe they understand that there's a hidden job market and don't know how to execute that, or the networking piece. So for the people that are looking at change careers, the first thing I do with them is make sure that we've really thought through what they need from the career before we start looking at jobs, to think about what their needs are, and not their needs in 2021 so much as their needs going forward as long as they plan to work, so that we can make sure that whatever job we pick is the launch pad of a career. I mean, it's not really the end point unless you're 60, it might be the end point. But for most of my clients, the next job is going to be the beginning of a path that's going to last 10, 15, 20 years. And so it's important that we think beyond the initial role in terms of which one's going to set us up to be able to achieve what we're looking to achieve. The second thing I do is I help people to identify skills that they have that they could offer to the job market. I do this by going back through their background and identifying the patterns of things that they've done that they like to do, and that they're good at doing. And then the secret, and I'm going to let the cat out of the bag here, is the secret is to go out and look at the job market based on those skills, the inner workings of the job. I also recommend that when people are looking at change careers, that they look nationally. Even if they want to work, let's just say they want to work in Franklin, right? They still should look nationally when they're determining changes of career, because if they look locally, even if they're doing the right skill set, only 1 in 4 jobs ever gets published anywhere. So if you're looking in Franklin on a Wednesday afternoon at 3 o'clock with a specific set of skills, all you're going to see is what's open in Franklin at that point in time. That's not a great way to plan a career. It's much better to identify jobs that are in Denver and Los Angeles and Miami, and then say, okay, now I know the kind of job I want to target. Let me figure out what that employment base would be here. Once you do that, then it behooves you to make sure that your resume, LinkedIn, cover letter, all are talking about that job you're targeting next. One of the common mistakes I see in people's presentation in those things is that they talk about what they did before, but if they don't want to do what they did before,
Why talk about that?
Exactly right. Exactly right.
Well, John, it's come to the end of the show. I want to say thank you again for coming back on. You're always full of great information, and especially now, folks, if you are looking to change careers, if you're looking to update your information in your resume, please don't hesitate to reach out to John. His information has been shared on the screen. Call me here at the Chamber. I'd be glad to put you in touch. As I said before, he's helped numerous of my friends. He does a fantastic job. And we appreciate your time, John.
Well, you're welcome, Jack. It's a pleasure. Take care.
Okay. See you next time.
You bet.
Hey, Dave.
All right, cool. Good job.
Yeah, I think that worked out pretty well. John's
Yeah.